Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really appreciate this.
Can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and I guess it's not what you're currently doing, but what you have been doing?
Right. Currently, I'm doing nothing, but that's very, very different from my career. I'm the kind of quintessential serial entrepreneur. I have started and built five companies, two which got acquired, a few of them that didn't see the light of day. I'm just kind of like an idea and an execution guy. I get an idea, run with it. By training, my undergrad was in information technology, so I'm a programmer, and at the same time, I also got my MBA. So I've always been at this intersection of technology and business, and I just love it right there.
It is a fun that most of my career has been the same way. It's if you can if you can manage both of those worlds, it's a really fun place to be.
It's exact, and so many people like they ask, "What's your hobbies? What do you?" I'm like, I can't answer that. Like my hobby, the only thing I like doing is building businesses, like making money. I don't even like the spending money part. I just like making it. I just think that part is so fun to get in the head of the consumer, solve the problems, and do it in a scalable, technological way.
So which company do you think is the most recognizable by consumers?
Yeah, definitely. For me, it was Nomorobo. That was the one that got the most publicity. We've stopped. Well, maybe I'm jumping the goal. We've stopped a lot of crime, and a lot of people getting taken advantage of. But oddly, actually, I think what still I want to say haunts me, but in a good way. And I have it if anybody's watching on video. Is my this is called the Wing Dipper. So this was my first invention. It's actually a cup for dipping buffalo wings in dressing, right? So it has like the round part for the drumstick and then a wide part for the flat wing.
I
So
love it.
this is the one that everybody's like, so how's that wing dipper going? How's the wing dipper? So, of all those things, those are probably the two that I'm most known for.
So I take it the Wing Dipper is doing well.
So no, actually. So
No.
when this is again, I don't know how much time you got on the podcast, but yeah, this is the sin. I was eating wings at a bar, um, got frustrated that I couldn't get enough dressing on it. Realized the problem was the shape of the cup. One thing led to another. I was on a show called American Inventor. It was Shark Tank before being Shark Tank. Launched the product, and then it was good. It was available in bars and restaurants all over North America and Canada and the United States. And then when I started Nomorobo, kind of had to make a choice
Yeah.
of, the eagle that chases after two rabbits misses them both. And I decided to double down on Nomorobo, sunsetted Wing Dipper, and obviously 10 years later, it was the right call.
Good to hear. So Nomorobo, did you start it because you were annoyed with all the phone calls you were getting?
That's what everybody says. Like, oh, how many of these? Honestly, I didn't even know what a robocall was at the time. I didn't have a landline, right? I guess it was like 30, maybe early 30s when I started it. No, so my last company had just been acquired by Groupon. This was in 2013, and I planned to take time off like I'm doing now. But I don't know. I can't not solve a problem, right? Whether it's chicken wings or at the time the FTC had they called it the Robocall Challenge. So they put out a contest, a competition. It was a $50,000 prize for anybody who could try and solve this robocall problem. And what they really wanted was to find people that weren't in telecom. Because again, remember a decade back, right? The problem's still huge, but it was even worse a decade back. They're the organization that is supposed to solve them, but they wanted new eyes on on
Yeah.
the problem. I had done a lot of development work with Twilio and telecom. Like I was on BBS's way back in the day. Like
Yep.
this was I just ate this stuff for breakfast. I had a very and also I guess my business background. If you read between the lines of the competition, they wanted something that could like go around the carriers because the carriers just weren't cooperating. I had a really unique way of doing that. And right, spoiler alert, I won.
I love it. So, well, like, I kind of want to talk about like what can you talk a little bit about the background of the robocall industry? Do you know when it kind of hit its peak of? Yeah, okay, I guess we have to take another step back. Is there is robocalls, which are legitimate businesses, telemarketing
You got
for
it.
the purpose of an actual business, and then probably what more people are more used to now is the robocalls associated with scams and who
Great
knows
point.
what
Right.
else.
Yeah. So let's set the
So
stage. Yeah.
let's set the stage, because I imagine when you first started doing this, a lot of it was telemarketing calls versus scam calls.
Yeah. So if you go and look, the way I look at everything also is everything is on a continuum between, we'll call it good and bad, right? The evil and horrible, whatever that may be. So, right. So for this discussion, and robocalls usually have a negative connotation, but they're actually really good, right? You want to get your prescription reminders,
Yeah.
your doctor's office, those kinds of things. So they kind of do get lumped together. But what we're talking about here are illegal and or unwanted robocalls, because with like canned spam, and you can unsubscribe. There's a lot of laws around that. Technically, there's a lot of laws around the robocalling field also, but in so many words, and we can talk a little bit about the evolution of this, is that there's just a lot of unwanted calls, both then and now, that may or may not be illegal. And I guess this whole, call it the robocall piece, started with the TCPA, which was a law that was started in the late 80s, right, and didn't get implemented until the early 90s, that made these kind of automated dials illegal. But I mean, think about where it's 2024, right? You go back 30 or 40 years, there was literally there was no internet back then.
Yeah.
That wasn't, the automated dialers were like these boxes, and it was basically mechanical, right? But everybody needed hardware and everything, and that's what they were trying to stop. Well, look what happened, right? An internet connection got overlaid over the entire globe. Anybody can plug anything in, start pumping out millions of these calls for virtually nothing. So what do you expect is going to happen, right? Fraudsters, scams are just going to run in there. They're going to be rampant. So yeah, that's, I guess I can go in a little bit. But does that at least set the tone for everybody who's listening here?
That sets the tone, I think. Great. So in the beginning of it, when you first started getting involved, the bulk of it was pseudo-legitimate business calls.
So the one, in 2013, the one with like Rachel from Cardholder Services, that was like the stereotypical robocall. And you'd pick up, and it was, again, a pre-recorded message, and it was all about like kind of debt reduction.
Yeah.
And so these calls were, we've been seeing the same, it's all the same, same variations on that. But we'll also push those over into, we'll call it like dubious products. Like we'll consider that more spam than scam.
Yeah.
Again, debt consolidation. Maybe they are legitimate. If you see a lot of the like vehicle warranties, you see them advertised on TV, you get robocalls about them. There's like affiliate lead generators and things like that. So again, this industry is so interesting because you can slice and dice it. But probably what we want to really talk about is the scams, not necessarily the spam. And we're taking the political robocalls out, and those, again, we can talk all about that, but in so many words, the ones that are making the biggest impact on people are the outright scams. Again, I'm calling from Chase, or the grandparent scam, right? A lot of elderly people are getting scammed. I think that's the one that most people are, because like, who are these people that are perpetrating this, and like, how do they live with themselves? So
that is a very legitimate, good question. So why did, go back a couple of years. Why did the not cell phone providers, why did the systems that the telephone providers put in place not stop the problem back in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s?
Yep. The key to understanding why stopping the robocall problem is so difficult is because you can't analyze the content of the message. So something like email spam filtering, right? There's, you can put in a set of software and rules, and you can go and analyze a text message spam, right? You see that. It's called like store and forward.
Yeah.
But with a voice call, the only information that you have is the sending phone number, maybe some upstream stuff like carrier, but that's very little. And then volumetrics based on that. So, and again, like the phone carriers can't, luckily, or they shouldn't, right, be listening to every call.
Yeah.
So that's why everybody's like, well, we can stop email spam. Why can't we just do it on voice? Voice, again, because of the United States and because of the privacy things that we have, it's such a third rail that if the carriers just keep trying to punt, because if they get it wrong, the so heavily regulated, they don't want to stop calls, right? Since Alexander Graham Bell invented, the phone system, um, their job is about delivering calls, quality, reliability,
Yeah.
getting every call to you. So scammers come out, and then they're like, wait, we have to do the exact opposite of that. They're just not set up to do that, which is why, something like Nomorobo has been so successful.
And I suppose the margin of error in the sense that would be allowable for the phone company of, oh, we decided not to connect this call to 911. That's a little bit of liability. Oh, it was a legitimate call from the doctor's office telling you you have this condition and you immediately need to
There
go
you
to
go.
the ER. Those are not the calls that you want to accidentally block.
That's absolutely right. And like, one man's trash, another man's treasure kind of thing. What one person sees as spam, another person is wanted. And like, there's a lot of judgment calls, and exactly, they're just going to error on and especially if it's, opt in versus opt
Yeah.
out. It's going to be really difficult. If you didn't even notice, like, so Nomorobo blocks calls, but the carriers, they'll identify it for you, right? You'll see spam likely, scam likely, and everybody's like, well, why can't they just, stop the call for me? You just hit on it, right? They can't, because that would be bad if they get something wrong. Now, if you opt into something, right? We always talk about how, where you're like your answering service, and again, you're totally cool. That's very, but this question of, does scam and spam robocall protection belong at the carrier level? Obviously, I'm biased here,
Yeah.
but I think there's something to be said that, no, basic kind of stuff of, like, again, if you've identified it and these are obvious scams, yes, that level. As you move up that chain, I don't know. I really do think that consumers, nowadays,
Yeah.
there's a lot of products out there that can help. Way back in the day, there was literally nothing.
So, what's the difference between how carriers identify spam or scam likely and how Nomorobo is doing it?
Yeah, the main differentiator, so the carriers, um, and even the government, right? Human reports. So, what's don't answer the phone, right?
Yeah.
That's what they always say. Don't answer unknown numbers. Um, I don't know. I think even as time goes on, more and more, you have to. It's actually, everybody's like, well, don't do that. Doctor, it hurts when I go like this.
When you get over 50, you realize you need to take a lot more of those phone calls because you're going to the doctor more. You've got kids in school. You've got all
That's
sorts of
exactly
things
right.
where you're getting calls that you don't expect that are
And
legitimate.
again, right. And so again, like, we would talk about like pets and the pet sitter and this, or again, you're calling a contractor, or again, like life threatening, God forbid, right? My uncle had some health issues, and he was always calling from all, when we would go into the hospital, various numbers. And so again, like that, and then you leave a voicemail, but then you have to call the person back, whatever. Right. So that being said, the way that the carriers have been able to do that is they basically look at, they have something called the campaign registry, which we'll get to in a second. But before all of that, in so many words, they would look at the sending phone number and try and find out patterns. Hey, is that calling a lot of people? Is it a new number? Does it have a reputation? Things like that. And then they would go and try and label it. With Nomorobo, kind of one of our secret weapons was, in addition to all the volumetrics, right? We were analyzing hundreds of millions of calls, seeing those phone numbers coming in. We built the world's largest commercial honeypot. And what we did is we bought all of these phone numbers from the carriers, phone, numbers, lines, whatever you want to call them, that were just so overrun with spam that they couldn't give it out to their customers. So if any of your, the listeners or viewers have seen, they get a new phone number, the first call there is a robocall. They're going to call up AT&T or Verizon and say, give me a new number or whatever. Or if they're getting so many robocalls, they're going to say, like, give me a new number. We went and bought all of those misfit numbers. And because of that, we were able to answer them. We were able to set up bots that would play along. We were able to transcribe that data, categorize it, and then within just even one phone number, we could go and slam down every single call from that number because we had proof of that. Right? Carriers had the kind of an inkling, and then when you throw over it the volumetrics information, then you have user reports. It's not perfect. It gets things right. It gets things wrong, and whatever. And then layering it on that way, weighting different pieces on every single call that came in, we were able to do it way better than any of the carriers and any of the competition out there.
I mean, that's interesting that you got to build bots to talk to the bots.
Oh, I always joked about that. And this is even before like AI. Again, a decade ago, AI wasn't a thing. But I would joke, this is like Skynet. This is Terminator. Like my bots are fighting their bots, and there's no human being. They're just talking to each other, and no human being is in the middle of it. That's actually, it's not about like bullets flying or anything like in the movies. It's really just about trying to steal a couple of dollars from your bank account.
So, with phone number spoofing, has that made uh, this process more difficult?
Yeah. So when we talk about spoofing, I think same deal. Let's set the stage on that. Everybody thinks like, well, they shouldn't know, that phone number is like tied to an actual device, a mobile line, a landline. Turns out that actually when caller ID, right, which we're calling about spoofing an ID, phone number, um, it was a walled garden. It was AT&T, right? The Bell ran it, so there was no security around it. They would basically just set the calling number, and again, it wasn't even a big thing. Then they had the caller ID, boxes and things like that, but it was completely unprotected. It's the way I describe it. It's like the return address on an envelope.
Yeah.
Right. I can't. Technically, is it a crime to change? I don't know about, postal service law. I don't know. But, in so many words, if I wanted to write a letter to you and address it from my neighbor and drop it in the mail, you would get it and you would think it came from my neighbor. That's all that caller ID was way back then. They've been trying to put on, they call it stir and shaken, which we can get into definitions there, which is all that is certified caller ID. Again, on the text message side, we've been talking about campaign registry where companies can register what they're going to be sending out and things like that. But in so many words, spoofing is nothing more than setting that caller ID that is completely open. That's the way the system was done, right? Like an original sin. If we can go back in time, we would say like, have some sort of signing, or even nowadays, like, like SSL on like secure on a web, you see that little lock that used to mean, that's a trusted. Now it's not. It just means that the connection between you and that server are secure. All that, even stir and shaken, if you get the little check, all it means is that that person's confirmed that they own that. It makes it easier to trace back, but it still doesn't say anything about the content of the call. And that content of the call is where the real big problem comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. This could be a legitimate originator of a scam call.
There we go. Exactly. That's exactly right. Hey, and it'll tell you who it is. And they're like, yeah, I'm pushing out the scam and spam.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you're drawing the analogy to the little lock in the browser, because that used to be when an SSL certificate cost you $1,000 a year. It was a significant barrier to entry for, a churn and burn scammer, because you got to scam quite a bit to be able to afford the certificate, and they did verifications. And nowadays it's, 3 seconds.
You just said barrier to entry, right? Like back in the day, again, I sound like an old man here, right? And in any system, if there's no barrier to entry, usually we talk about this like in business, right? Like if a business, like you can open up a burger stand, I can open up a burger stand, right? There's very low barrier to entry, right? We're not going to start our own search engine, right? We're not going to be competing, or our own phone, right? Those are very high barriers to entry. Whenever there's an area that is a low barrier to entry, not only are unsophisticated people going to come in, but the scammers are going to run right there. The higher the barrier to entry, the more in general you are protected from it, which is why this problem is so rampant. I personally think that it is the biggest fraud vector in the potentially in the world, because it's so open, and it's incredibly difficult to plug that hole, because that's the way the system was designed. It was designed to be resilient. The phone system was designed that if you blow up a part of it, it'll just get routed around, and that's great, but it also creates a lot of problems.
Yeah, it's the thing that makes it as resilient and wonderful of a system it is, like the internet, is the thing that also makes it a problem when things go bad.
Exactly. And like, how, again, back in the day, local, long distance, like those were, you would have to go through your phone bill. Hey, who do we know in Larchmont, right? Like going through there. Nowadays, nobody, you talk to anybody. I heard I was in Staples the other day, and they were talking about like somebody was trying to send a fax, and they were asking how much it was going to cost. And the woman behind the counter said, well, if it's local, it's $2 a minute. If it's long distance, I haven't heard it's $4. I was like, I haven't heard that. Nobody thinks that way anymore. There's no such thing. Back in the day, though, right, there was this local and long distance. And again, that I don't want to say it hasn't kept up, but like it's just no wonder that there's all these especially when it's again global. It's not to say that these scams don't originate, they usually don't originate domestically,
Yeah.
but they obviously come back here. But that's exactly how this problem became so widespread. It's a flaw in the system. The great thing, we can make free local and long distance. I can pick up the phone and call literally anybody on the planet, be connected with them instantly, and it costs me virtually nothing.
Yeah.
And a scammer can pick up a phone or a computer, right, and call anyone or hundreds or millions of people for virtually nothing. So yeah, you take the good, you take the bad, and that's how we got here.
Was like the rise in voice over IP kind of the big launching point
100%.
for these things becoming volumetric in a sense?
That's exactly right. If there was no VoIP, there really wouldn't, robocalls or scam calls, unwanted calls would not nearly be, because again, barrier to entry. You would have to have all these machines. They would have to be in a certain place. You could regulate it easily because of the nature of VoIP and internet and all these connected networks. Which again, I don't think you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right?
Yeah.
The toothpaste doesn't go back into the tube. So we just have to deal with it with having, again, like protection on that side. But absolutely, that's how we got here. It really is. In order to understand how you got here, is we have to look back at decades of this technology. It's so funny. I don't know if you look at any telephone history or anything like that. All of these things, caller ID was touted as this amazing thing, and like, oh,
it will solve everything.
Exact answering machines and voicemail, all this stuff. And like now, it's we get all those things, but there's also it's just, oh my god, I got to get another robocall.
So, where do you kind of see this industry going? More government regulation, more solutions like Nomorobo, more AI answering our phone calls for us?
a combination, right? This might be a cop out, right? But and people talk to me all the time, like, well, the government should be able to just to do something. This is a really complex, complicated problem, right? And I, say what you want about politics and politicians. They are doing all they can. They really are. They're having hearings. Again, I've spoken in front of Congress 3 times. They are working, the FCC, the FTC. Again, I don't care if you're red or blue or left or right or up or down or anything like that. The one thing we can all agree on is nobody wants unwanted calls, right? Nobody wants spam calls. So the politicians, the legislators, the regulators are doing everything they can, but it's a hard problem to stop. And the carriers are not exactly incentivized to stop these calls. So they're going to do what they have to, of course. But as we talked about before, the liability, if they get something wrong, they're just, if they had their way, they just wouldn't do it, right? Even if you think about like with email spam protection, right? There's no law or anything like that your email provider has to give you spam protection. Is that a selling point? Of course. Why is Gmail so popular, right? Arguably, it has one of the best or one of the best spam filtering. So that's honestly where, and then there's also the third party, apps and things. But again, it's really, it's a really nuanced kind of thing, because even when you go and look at only back up, when Nomorobo first came out, the only thing we protected was landlines, because both of the handset, manufacturers, so Google and Apple, iPhone and Android, wouldn't allow developers to build call blocking apps.
Yeah.
Again, nowadays we look at it like it makes, and again, privacy concerns. And so both of those companies, and they are 2 of the largest companies on earth, right? Potentially 2 of the largest companies that have ever existed, are the gatekeepers. Okay, great. So then they figure out privacy. Again, I built Nomorobo because won a competition from the FTC, and like our reputation was on the line with every single call that we stopped or allowed through. And we weren't just going to go and screw that up for a couple of dollars. Some of the competitors, right? And then the competitors got acquired by companies that weren't as privacy focused. And then that got covered. So, when you look at all of it, I think the politicians need to continue to make as many laws against it as possible in the right way. I have advocated for them taking all of this hodgepodge of weird things that have been, Band-Aid on, take it all, throw it out in so many words, and make everything opt-in, right? If you just say that every one of these commercial calls is illegal unless you have opted in, and again, I'm sitting here armchair court, it's easy for me to say, right? But whatever. They're doing what they can. I think the carrier needs to do what they can, give as many tools to their customers as they can. And then there is a certain responsibility for on the personal side, right? So get, either educate, yourself, use the services there, or, inexpensive services like Nomorobo. That was even when I first started, we had basic, which is very, very simple, $2 a month, used a blacklist approach. Then we launched Max, which used call answering. It used heuristics. It used a lot of AI. It was all like a call screener. When we came out with that, there's a family plan for it. So, right. And it's, again, this isn't a sales pitch, but like the individual is $50 and the family plan is $80 for 4 lines. Right. So now, again, like you can protect, your entire family for $20. Okay. Now all of a sudden, since there's something accessible, people are like, okay, I'm willing to do that. To protect me and my family. You can't just sit back and say, no, I'm not going to do anything. But yeah, really nuanced, and literally if everybody, including the individual, all the way up to government regulators and lawmakers, and the media, getting the word out that it's not hopeless, right? You don't just have to not answer calls anymore. This is ultimately how we're never going to win the war, but this is how we just at least keep it under control,
keep it at a manageable level. Was there, and if you can't answer this question, don't answer it. Were you running Nomorobo, were you getting calls from marketing organizations saying, how can we get around your product? Like, can we pay to have our calls delivered?
Of course. Yeah. Oh yeah. We, and this is the thing, even when, the customer support team and the data team, so I basically told them, like, we look at our analytics, we have our honeypot, we have all the proof. I'm like, you guys make the decision. I will stand behind you 110%. But of course, there would be people who, thought that they were dealing with some customer support person, and right. And like everywhere else, but like, our team is empowered, and I truly mean that. Like, if they say it, I literally never reversed course, if anything. And so that, let me speak to them. Fine. Or we get all these legal paper, I had so many times, if you don't take it off, you're going to sue me. Hey, totally understand. Here's the address. Here's the email address. Send it on over, and we'll absolutely have our lawyers take a look at it. And I'm not saying that it was a challenge or anything like that, but that was just a scare tactic. And I'm not going to be bullied. I'm not going to have my team be bullied. And again, our whole thing, you might be making legal calls, but they might be unwanted. And when our customers hire us, they are saying, we trust you to make that decision, and we only want wanted calls. Again, we can do that as an app provider, as a third party. A carrier can't do that. The government shouldn't. You don't want the government telling you what calls you can receive. You do not want that. Trust me on this one, right? So
they'll all be political advertisement calls.
Guaranteed. Everybody, right, exactly. Everybody's going to be listening in on everything. They're going to be allowing. That's what, it's funny, it's ironic, right? On the robocalling side, the politicians carved out political robocalls.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's not hypocrisy, I don't know what it. These are terrible. These are awful. Nobody should make them except for us.
Except for us, yes. Are you familiar with kind of the email blacklist, the DNSBLs from the late 90s and whatnot?
Sure, yeah.
So what was your service kind of classified under the same thing in terms of, well, you weren't technically blocking the calls, but that the consumer entrusted you. The consumer was actually making the decision, not you guys, in a sense, is how you get around the lawsuits.
Yeah. So and this is the industry. So with like the Spam House and the call it like the community blacklists around IPs and for email servers and things, the industry organized itself, there's like nonprofits, and they figured out a way to do that because they were incentivized to do that. It was a better product, right? And all those pieces. On the telecom side, the carriers could never kind of organize between the nonprofits and nobody could. Then there were the different silos and where it's coming. It was just, and I know everybody, again, I keep on saying this, isn't it the same? It's not. It really isn't. And so even like when we talk about like crime, right? Like, yeah, we have a police force, right? But like people still have firearms, people still have alarms and things like that. So just saying like, well, let's just get rid of crime. It's just not, that's there, but right, exact poof, just like that. It just kind of doesn't work, which is again, and maybe this is what we're talking about this whole thing. Maybe even if there's one thing that your viewers and your listeners take away is that this problem is really complex. It's
Yeah.
really complicated. It's complex. It's nuanced. It's the perfect breeding ground for both fraud and horribleness and great stuff of being able to protect consumers and make better products,
Yeah.
which I think is why I find it absolutely fascinating.
So, what were some of the craziest conversations your AI had with scammers and whatnot?
Oh, I loved it. So the bots that we built. So my uncle, he's a little bit older, and he leaves me voicemails, a couple a day, and he's allowed to, right? We love Uncle Steve. But after listening to them, I was like, because he would just continue to telling me everything that's going on in the day. I was like, oh, hold on a second. I'm like, this guy's giving me gold. So I literally took all those voicemails and chopped them up and we called it the Stevie bot. And that it would just keep these guys on. And again, it was just because there was a lot of, okay, right, wait, what? And like just listening to some of those. Now, again, keeping them on the line is not going to make the problem go away. And even like and we never tried to do it that way. But what it allowed us to do was get a lot of recordings, right? We could then go and analyze the calls because again, they were coming into company owned. We can't do it on the consumer side, right? That there's a wall there. We're never touching consumer lines, but our honeypot data, we can do whatever we want. And so that gave us this view into, how does the grandparent scam work? What happened, and by keeping it on, because there was, 10,000 calls, an hour would come in on a bad, like on a easily 10,000 calls, was an hour, a minute. It depended on where it was. It was just a huge amount of calls that were coming on through. There was no way for humans to go and answer it.
Yeah.
So by putting the bots on, figuring that out, pulling out, that's how we were able to get our newest scam alerts that got out there. That was what was really important. As far as like ridiculous, it was, you go and search in the database for any kind of expletives. That was just gold too. You're like, okay, here's one. But those were the we'll call it like the funny ones or whatever. But the ones that were the craziest ones were the ones that were even our data team would listen to it and go, is this real? Like, is that because they know certain, like on the Medicare scams, they know your Medicare number, they know your phone number. Those were the ones that I will say were craziest because we'd all look at each other and be like, that is this legitimate or not? And if we couldn't figure it out, how was a regular consumer going to be able to figure that out?
What were some of were the trends like pretty cyclical in that you would get Medicare seasonally during open enrollment, or was it? I guess you have those things that are like calendar cyclical. What were some of the things that were cyclical that you maybe would think to be like it was the grandparent scam was popular every January or every 2 years?
They were evergreen, right? There was the gifts that kept on giving to the scammers, right? Always Medicare. It didn't even matter open enrollment or anything else like that. That was always there, right? Some of the home solar has been around for forever, right? Debt consolidation, financial kinds of things. Those the seasonally, right? The tax scams would pop up around tax time. And what was really more interesting to see was like the spin that is being put on. So we'll call it like more macro trends. So when like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, a couple of years back when that was all over the news and things, all of a sudden now there was a lot of robocalls and spam texts about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
People were interested. They didn't know what was going on. As the popularity or that is not, kind of gotten out of the mainstream, those calls are not as rampant. Vehicle warranties, still huge. Solar has gone down a bit, right? Everybody who's gotten solar panels has probably gotten it right now. And so and we want to actually back up. This is kind of, maybe this was interesting, is that let's talk about how some of these robocallers work. Everybody thinks that it's like the solar company just, hiring a robocaller, putting it in. But actually what happens is called lead generators. So there are these companies that put together these, solar robocalls. They're the ones who go and pay for the company to make all these calls. And then when they get a lead, right, if your neighbor, or obviously not you or your family, right, but the neighbor calls, they go and sell that lead to a solar company, probably a legitimate or
Yeah.
semi-legitimate company. And the reason that they do this, not only because of money or whatever, is this plausible deniability. So you're a semi-legitimate solar company, you find a marketing
I'm just
company.
buying leads. I didn't know what they were
I
doing.
don't know where they come from, right? Same deal, like the vehicle warrant. Oh, yeah, I see this one advertising on TV. And this is what happens when they mix all those together, right? So maybe one of those, they use affiliates, they use lead gens. All of a sudden now, even if you call up, some people are like, well, I'm just going to ask them who they're working for or whatever. Those middlemen who are really the big problems in this area.
Yeah.
If you want to get over to the actual scams, like the full on, so again, grandparent scam, any one of the refund scam where they say Amazon,
Yep.
you need a refund, any of the ones where there's a virus on your computer, those frauds and scams are usually done by single boiler rooms, usually overseas. They are usually contracting and making those calls themselves. And then they're just basically hiding their tracks by navigating through the network, because they also know, like, even if you trace it back, the chance of getting them, it's like, like ants in the summer, right?
Yeah.
They're going to pop right back up. So yeah, maybe that's if we're going over to the legitimate, semi-legitimate, the spam, the whatever, all the way over to those ones that we've seen it all the time, right? That people are losing their life savings, or they've won the lottery, or Publishers Clearinghouse, and in general, those come out of actually Jamaica. I don't know why that certain areas of the world have taken on certain scams, but that's the nature of how this, I'll say, industry, because it's the illegal.
It is an industry.
It is. It's a business, and usually these guys are really good business people. They're illegal businesses, right? But and that just goes to show you how well these work, right? Everybody says, well, why they keep on still calling me, right? We all hear about these. I've been talking about this for a decade, and yet they're still there, and they're still there because they work every single day. Probably in the time that we've been talking, right? At least one person has gone, oh my God, my Amazon account, or right, there's a virus on my computer, and right now they're getting taken for hopefully only hundreds of dollars. And once you're scammed for there, you're on this mark list where then they're going to keep on calling you and trying to get more and more money out of you because it works. It's social engineering. These guys are great at their jobs. They're probably better at their jobs than maybe even all of us. they're certainly, we try, we can't stop all of them. And I guess they can't get all of them. But when they get, a fish on the hook, they reel that thing in and they take it forever. They take that person for all that they're worth.
So maybe this is a twist to it. Are there things that we can do, not getting them on the phone and wasting their time, but making your telephone number less attractive, so to speak?
So again, I'm biased here, right?
Yeah.
Simple answer, use my product, right? But the simple answer is kind of like no, because this is so, and it's not necessarily about us. Mm-hmm. We're not going to get scammed. Your listeners are not going to be the ones that get scammed in general, right? We've all gotten pretty close in things, and I'm not saying it's like, but we know about these things, but our spouses, or when these robocallers use tactics like they're threatening, or there's urgency, or it's again like, oh, the family members are here. When they try and get these robocalls, try and get people to panic, act quickly, to get caught. Again, with the grandparent scam, for anybody who doesn't know, right? They call up and they say, grandpa or grandma, right? And then the person goes, oh yeah, and they're in jail, they were arrested, they have a ticket, whatever it may be. When you talk to people who have been victimized with the scam, they usually say, oh no, when they called, they knew my grandson's or my granddaughter's name. It's not actually what winds up happening. What usually happens is they say grandma, and then the person says something like, oh, is that you, Jimmy? And then he goes, yeah, this is, and the scammer takes. So that's social engineering. Right now they know that they got somebody over there. So yeah, making your number, look different. No, in so many words, right? Especially for older folks, we have to help them out and get more protection. For people who know it at best, this is an annoyance. Don't give out your number to everybody. That's and even now, like you walk into everywhere, Old Navy, what's your phone number? What's your phone number? What? No. And people just, no, thank you. I was in some other store. They're like, "Oh, can I get your email?" I'm like, "Let's not make this like a long-term relationship. Like, I'm here to like buy some bananas." It's so yeah. I mean, I guess there's like an ounce of prevention, but that's only going to stop like the legitimate companies,
Yeah.
right? So again, like Old Navy, do you want them to text you? You just don't even get into that habit. Do you want them to call you? No. Do you want that on every? But again, with all the data breaches and everything, no. Everybody's assuming that all of your data is out there. Yeah. And now you have to take steps, unfortunately, to protect yourself and to, vote people into office who are going to help and to, work with companies that are going to help protect you.
And I guess the assumption is, anytime someone claims to call you and know your name, and they know your name, it doesn't mean anything.
There we go. So even what we've been working on this pathway, right? So the first part is, right, if it's a known number, in general, it's in general. So people are like, well, but they knew they're spoofing a certain, yes, of course but on the edge there, right? So let's just take out the known numbers. Cool. Now an unknown number comes in. First thing, just get your guard up. Immediately know that if it's an unknown number, got it. Does it mean it's bad? Does it mean it's good? No. But now what are they saying? What are they asking about? What data are you giving them?
Yeah.
How can you say, I'm not comfortable here, let me call you back? Or the grandparent scam is, here's a really interesting example, is they just have people that are domestic. They're usually here in the United States. People that have gotten out of jail, people that have very few options in life for ways to make, a legitimate living. So they call up, say, this is, grandpa, they go through that whole scam. And what they say is, you need to call my attorney at this other number and then give them my case number. And then there's usually another group, again, domestically, that's kind of like the masterminds behind that thing.
The first one was the lead gen group.
That's exactly right. Right. And they might get paid. I don't even know how that works. Right. I would love to, if anybody knows, reach out to me. But the way that then that scam is working is it's disconnecting the organization and the group that's making those calls. And it's also insulating the main group. If you just call up and you say, "Oh yeah, my grandson is in jail. Oh, what's his case number?" And you can't just say 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. You got a case number from it's almost becomes like one of those like choose your own adventure, like that unlocks, or like a puzzle or a game or something like that. So just to put it out, like the sophisticated level that these, I'm sure they're buying lists of phone numbers of people, of landlines, of older people, right? They're not going to run a grandparent scam on somebody, who's middle-aged. That's not going to be worth anybody's time. They're obviously taking data from these data breaches. I actually heard stories that they'll buy lists from like durable medical equipment. So people that are selling wheelchairs and walkers and things, they're just selling some of the data. Well, now they're targets and things. So even as I'm talking about, I guess there are some ways, but I mean, don't order a wheelchair. I don't know.
You do things like I do. I have different phone numbers for different uses. Mm-hmm. And there are phone numbers that I will give people in less trusting situations, let's say.
Absolutely, yeah. One of our big partners is Burner, right? Yeah, they implement Nomorobo on all of their Burner lines. But right, having a bunch of everybody has one phone number. You might need other phone numbers exactly like that. Is it going to look? Is it going to prevent everything? I'm going to say, is it even worth it? Maybe to a point. But again, the only way that is, we'll say like foolproof, is right to have some sort of answering service or somebody's screening service and things like that. So all these things, again, it's like an ounce of prevention, right? Or 80-20 rule, 90-10, right? You can do all these things and maybe it's a little bit, or, look at some of the new technologies that are out there and really kind of solve the problem. But again, it's under the person. Every person can make that decision. Maybe everybody else is just like, and look, I turn off Nomorobo all the time, right? When the contractors are calling, and inevitably what happens is
turn it back on.
So we remind you, but inevitably, I swear to you, that again, I'm not even, you want to use the product, you want to use it, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. Whenever I turn it off because a contractor is coming or whatever, and I have to answer every call, and I answer the call, and a goddamn robocall comes in, and of course, now I was on the porch waiting, the guy was coming, call, boom, robocall. Like, I don't know how they know. Well, they don't, right? They actually, perfect, great. How do they know that you just bought from Amazon? because everybody
But
just
just
bought
bought
from
from
Amazon.
Amazon.
Right? So it's not even a joke, but that's how do they know? They don't know. They're just blasting these things out, right? And it just happens to be the right time, the right place.
Okay, so here's a feature request for the company that you don't own anymore.
Yeah,
That when you disable it, you can set the amount of time that you're disabling it for.
I totally agree. It's one of the things like it reminds you after like 2 hours or something, but right, you don't want to go and turn it back on. I would love that little reminder that says, right, remind me in, what was that? It was something it's a great, and this is the part that I love that you're telling me that, but it also frustrates me. So even after the
I
acquisition,
got to start
right,
up a new company with that in mind.
I have no control. So again, a guy like me, like an entrepreneur at heart, and like maybe with some control issues, hearing some, if I was still absolutely boom, we're right there, and I would be emailing you back, and that we fixed it. That was even like when the company was acquired, they wanted me most earnouts and
Yeah.
transitions are 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That wasn't even in the cards. I'm like that. I'm not even talking to anybody. That's not going to work well for anybody. The company that acquired it, it originally said, "Can you stick around for a year?" And I said, "That's also not going to be great for anybody." Right? When I'm in a place where I don't have control, I'm like, trust me, it's not. So basically, it was just 6 months because they have their view of it and the way that they want it. And again, they were a great company that is acquiring it. I stand behind them 100%. And we had other options, and all the other companies that were acquiring them they didn't respect the consumer's privacy like the company that did. But exactly that. Now I'm just kind of a little bit powerless a little bit. And so I know how to find, if anybody else has any problems that they need to solve, like reach out to me, because I'd love to keep on talking about these things. Because as soon as I heard one of those, boom, we have a development team meeting. We're looking at it. Exactly. Let's change the reminder line.
So is there anything about kind of the scam calls that do get through that keep you up at night? Or an aspect of like, oh, I see a tidal wave coming. What would that be?
Yeah. So I wish it was a tidal wave, honestly, because then we could stop it, right? If it was one of these big bang, or if it was an asteroid that was coming, if it was like the Robocall asteroid, so everybody, AI and whatever. No, this is death by 1,000 paper cuts. This is scammed by 1,000 paper cuts. This is $200 here and $400 there. And then they hit the mother load and just yanked out $1.3 million out of somebody's life savings. And that's what makes it even more difficult. If there was one big again, even on the AI side, is it going to, they've been doing, we'll call it pseudo AI for years. They, if you ever gotten one from like scam charities where you hear the voice of a police officer, all that is a soundboard, right? There's a call center somewhere overseas. There's a lot of people sitting there with headsets on, and they're sitting in front of a computer, and they're pushing buttons, and it's playing that initial question. You're like, "Are you a robot?" And then they go and look on their screen, and they tap it, and like, "No, I'm not a robot." So can I count on your whatever? That was, we'll call it pseudo AI. It was just expensive AI. It wasn't artificial, but right. So that stuff has been around for a long, long time on the robocall. The only thing that I guess would really worry is if, who should be worried? The overseas call centers, right? Yeah. They should be worried that their jobs are going to be eliminated by using AI. So is the problem with us? No, I'm going to say it's with the robocallers, and good for them. Their life deserves to be a little bit more difficult.
When I was interviewing Doug, I was thinking back that it was one of those police charity calls, and like I have those turned off. But when I was taking the phone calls, I could always tell because it was the same voice, even though they're hey, it's Bob, it's Steve, it's all the same voice. The thing that I thought that was funny was the background, the call center background track started at the exact same time on every button. So if it was a 10-second response, it was the exact first 5 seconds that was on the 5-second response, and I could hear like the same voice, the same laugh in the background. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. They got lazy.
Those artifacts, like AI. When you see somebody with 6 fingers in AI, you're like, this is not real. There's always going to be a tell. Again, you're much more sophisticated. Obviously your viewers and your listeners are more sophisticated, but like, again, some normal person who's just hearing that, how are they supposed to pick up on that? And the only way they're able to pick up on that is if they've already picked up the phone, at which point, if you're working, your attention is now gotten shot. If you're eating dinner, shot. If you're playing
Yeah.
with your kids, shot. How do you know? I joke, it's like a bowl of M&Ms with like glass shards.
Oh, gee.
Right? I want an M&M, right? And what are you going to do? You're going to stop eating that bowl of M&Ms and just let all the M&Ms go to voicemail. So that's why it's basically my voicemail is talking to your voicemail. But yeah, you're asking great questions here. And that's, again, I hope everybody that's listening to this is hearing why after this whole thing is, when you get to the end of it, like, wow, I didn't realize that this problem was so difficult to solve. It just seems easy. Everything seems easy.
Yeah.
And there's tells and there's technology. I personally don't think anything will ever solve it. Maybe but it won't. It's just like your immune system, right? Like the phone system needs an immune system. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get sick. You're going to get a cold. There's going to be pandemics that come on through. But like, could you? We'd all be dead if we didn't have an immune system. And this is what is really, again, I always looked at Nomorobo as an immune system for your phone, because you need something, because beforehand you were just susceptible to every virus that would come on through.
Every little horrible nasty out there.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Nobody would be able to do anything if the phone system actually, if your life looked like that, everybody would be in bed. I wouldn't recommend going out, right? But anyway.
So we were joking a little bit beforehand, and I was saying I would never want to testify in front of Congress. It doesn't matter whether you're left or right. You watch a news clip, and if you're on the opposite side, you can't get you can't get 3 words out of your sentence before somebody's screaming bloody murder at you. Yep. What was your experience testifying about this in front of Congress?
It's so funny that, and I'm thinking back. So the first time was, I won the Robocall challenge in April of 2013. And July of 2013 was when they asked me to testify. So it was April, May, June, like 3 months later. And I was working on Nomorobo kind of like under wraps, and it launched on October 1st. So, and anybody can go and look up on C-SPAN, go look up Nomorobo, go look up my name. You can watch that whole thing. And it's funny when you look back at it, the carriers their lobbying arm were literally and figuratively on the other end of the table. And I'm there saying, hey, technology can help stop this problem. And they're over there basically saying, no, it can't. We're not going to do it. We shouldn't be able to have it. Like, right. And like, we were polar opposites over there. Now, again, as time went on, we got much closer. Yeah. And again, I know all those people and, that kind of thing. But what was funny was if you watch, I do a lot of public speaking. I like communicating. I like teaching people how to communicate. And so I had my whole, opening remarks written out and everything. And, I was a part of Toastmasters, which helps you with public speaking and things. And when I was doing it, some of the people were saying, I said my ideas are called Nomorobo. They said, you might want to explain, because that's a play on like no more robocalls, which is like people might not get the joke. And I'm like, okay, that's actually right. So if you watch, I go, and my idea is Nomorobo. It's a play on no more robocalls. I thought it would just like go right on through. Best laid plans here, right? So Senator Claire McCaskill, who became like I think she was on CNBC or whatever. No, MSNBC. Anyway, she stops me in the middle of it. And again, go watch the video. I'm gonna edit this, put it right on in there. She goes, oh no. She's like, we understand, like that, we get the joke, and I'm like just panicking, like I've just been cut off by, and she literally said, she's like, people think we're idiots, but we're not. We get the joke. And just watch my face, because like I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, do I say nobody thinks you're an idiot? Because then like she's gonna know I'm lying, or do I acknowledge? And all I do, I just lean into the microphone and go, just making sure. I just wanted to make sure, and then I just get right back on. So that was the only panic part. But in so many words, right? And then by the second time when I did it, then we were able to. Oh, in the first time also, it's funny because I'm telling about how I already have over 3,000 emails on the mailing list that want to know when Nomorobo is coming out. Just a couple months later, on October 1st, I had over 30,000.
Yeah.
So even just like looking back, like you could see from a business perspective, a startup perspective, the need was there. The second time that I testified, right, obviously a little bit calmer. I knew what was going on. It was funny too, because then they had like competitors there. And again, we know what, we're all friends. We're still friends even to this day. Like because we're all our enemy is not each other. Our enemy is the illegal robocallers. And it was funny the third time, right? This is old hat. I'm like going shaking hands. Like I know all the people. Hey, how you doing? Whatever. But I forget who it was. There was another person who was her first time. She was freaking out. Like she was so nervous. And like I was like, and she has a very high ranking position. She just never testified. And here I am, like some yucko, just, hey, how's everything going and everything. And it was really funny now I'm thinking back. Yeah, anytime you give a talk, a speech or whatever, if you are prepared, if you're the good guy or girl, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're on that side, and you're kind of a human being, that doesn't have a 17 layers of legal, in general, I was just talking about the problem. I was talking about it from the way that we saw it, and I was giving my recommendations. And I wasn't going to change anybody's mind. But overall, that's just, I think, the way that everybody needs. I think if everybody communicated that way, I think there'd be a lot less people just screaming at each other. Yeah. And like a lot of Thanksgiving dinners would probably be a lot calmer. But.
I'm sure they would. So wrapping up here, any final advice to consumers?
Keep on, but first, it's a thank you. Thank you for getting the word out about all this. This problem is, again, so rampant, and like the fatigue. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people are looking and the newest episode of this comes on through and it's like, oh, robocalls again. I know everything, right? Everybody's just getting a little bit numb to everything. But again, the way that you and all the people that cover this in a unique way, everybody, you know what? Listen and educate yourself, and then talk to other people about, hey, those things, everybody thinks it's, oh yeah, and I sang to them, I yelled at them. Right? If everybody would say, like, actually it's a serious problem, and actually there are products to, and again, they all have free trials, try ours, tries any of the other ones. Again, if a carrier is giving a better version, the spam likely, the scam likely, give your money to them, right? There's very little difference nowadays in all of the carriers except for these kinds of services they're putting on. Again, take care of the people that are closest to you, getting the word out on, again, unknown numbers, what you should do. Don't panic. Everybody's like, well, I'm never going to answer this. And this person called and with my washing machine delivery. And I don't know, I listen to Dave Ramsey a lot. And the person called up and said that, like, I got an email about that their data was breached, and like a data breach or whatever. We get them. I get them every day, right? But she was calling up. She was in a panic. Oh my God. And then she thought it was a scam. And then it was like, in so many words, what you want to tell somebody like that is take a deep breath. It's fine. It happens all the time. Right? All of our data is out. Obviously, lock your credit and do all those pieces and take those steps. But again, anything that can stop, because panic doesn't help anyone. If anything, it makes it worse. So yeah, if I could get a couple of words out is, number one, don't panic, right? Number two, right? Learn, educate yourself, talk to people about this in the right way. Obviously, again, I'm biased, but I think that using a product like Nomorobo, again, we have a free trial, try it on out. If it's great, roll it out to your whole family. Again, there's RoboKiller, there's the ones that the carriers make. Use other services, and again, the second line and things like that. But in so many words, maybe I would just say is like, I don't mean this in a way, but like, let's all just take responsibility, but in a good way, right? There are now 10 years ago, somebody saying take responsibility, you're blaming the victim. You can't do anything like that. And at the final end, if you find yourself in the middle of one of these, right, stop. And, hope this doesn't happen, but if you find yourself that you're a victim of one of these scams, right, use your story to help other people. Hey, I never thought it was going to happen to me, but it did. Because again, there's so much shame behind this, because it's like, are people stupid? This is the thing, like, nobody is stupid. Very smart people fall for these scams. The thing is that these scammers are so good. It's not because they're smart, or they just have really good systems. They know psychology and they know all this. So maybe that's like I think I'm supposed to like reduce things to like 3 bullet points, but like maybe one of those things that like somebody will just be like, oh, okay, yeah, I can, after I listen to this, like, oh, that's actually really interesting, and maybe I can do something there. So that's just the way I see the world. And again, with the people that are on our end, the people that acquired the company, they're pouring more and more resources into it. I'm just a small guy. We had 3 full-time people and 2 part-time people for the whole thing, stopping hundreds of millions of robocalls. Just the way that I'm baked in, I just don't like big businesses. Yeah. And I was honestly keeping the company back a little bit. So the company that acquired it is pouring more and more resources into it, and they're doing really great. So I can only imagine when we talk in a year or 2 or something like that, what does it look like now? Amazing stuff. So yeah, really just have hope. Really don't panic. Don't be terrified. You can answer can answer your phone and things like that, and just do it that way. Keep on listening to these kinds of shows, learn about the new technology and see what's out there. And then you could just be a better consumer. You could be a better person.
Cool. Aaron, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like company wise, I'm not with them anymore, but check out nomorobo.com. I highly encourage everybody to do that. If you want to connect on me personally, drop into my LinkedIn, just search for Aaron Foss. You'll see it says like, Nomorobo. More than happy. If anybody is again on the entrepreneurship or the startup journey, I love helping people out. I've been through it. I have all of the scars to do that. And so again, I'm not selling anything. I don't have a coaching program. I don't have books. I don't have anything. I just do this because I love helping people out. And again, I was so fortunate to be able to stop. I don't know how many life savings I stopped from being stolen. And so now if there's other people who are like, hey, I have this idea, I don't know where to start, or I don't know where to go, or I'm stuck. Yes, that's probably the best way. And I'll reply back on my personal email and like, don't worry about bothering me. Like, that's what I'm here for.
I love it. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.